Welcome to the Passionistas Project podcast. We're Amy and Nancy Harrington, and our guest today is Natasha Case, co-founder and CEO of Coolhaus Ice Cream. Natasha fused her passions for food and architecture and built a woman-owned business that is bound to rival even the most established ice cream brands. We're thrilled that she's our inaugural guest because she exemplifies everything we want the Passionistas Project to be. She's strong, smart, charming, talented, artistic, and most importantly, passionate about what she does.
We're so glad to have you here on our podcast. So we're the Pop Culture Passionistas, and we're passionate about pop culture. So we like to start each interview by asking, what's the one thing that you are most passionate about?
I'm very passionate about, food and eating, definitely, but I would say it's the bigger kind of elements of that, which is the way that it brings people together and the experiences and the memories that are created from that, whether that's friends, family, loved ones, co-workers, clients. So the whole experience of food and the whole process behind it is really paramount for me.
So talk about how that love for food led you to start Coolhaus and kind of what you were doing before that and what led to it.
Sure, yeah. So my background's in architecture and design, and I was searching for a way to make architecture more fun and accessible. I felt like we were in a bubble in studio talking about all these cool ideas, but they weren't really translating to friends and people in kind of other departments. And I wanted to break out of that. And it was sort of by accident that I came to how to do that, which is a professor of mine criticized a scale model I had made saying it looked like a layer cake. And I thought, why is that a criticism, And kind of as an inside joke to myself and as kind of putting it back to him, I baked the next iteration of the model as a cake. And that was really, I think, my only all-nighter in all of architecture, undergrad, because I literally couldn't stop doing it. It was so fun. And the idea, knowing that it was edible and being playful in that way, it just ignited this passion. And also when I presented it to my colleagues and to my professor, you could just see that there was a different level of, a memory was being created in a different way. And there was a curiosity about it. Are we going to get to eat it when she's done talking? If you ask people from that studio what they remember, you're going to remember a model made of cake. And I thought, that's it. That's how I'll share the ideas and the stories behind architecture more, and the messages, the concepts, and also personally how I'll never get bored of it, because I know I'll never get bored of eating and making things for people and seeing that reaction. And that's kind of conceptually how I got to where I am, is bringing in design to food and merging them together, two passions, and telling the story about food through design. I still do the packaging design, still very involved in the visuals of the brand. I think that was the big, pivot point for me. And, the rest, there's obviously a lot of, okay, how did we get that going? We got the truck and we found a really good moment, I think, to launch. But I would say that's how it, in the bigger sense, I philosophically kind of got to where I am.
So what did your family and friends think about this venture as you started off on it?
I think there was a combination of excitement and definitely support overall. I mean, Freya, the other founder, and I are lucky to have such a big supportive network. And we started kind of introducing it through, not necessarily through Coolhaus at first, but through different ideas related to food and design, like high concept dinner parties. I remember we had one called Your Placemat, and everyone who came got a placemat of where they were from at this big seated dinner with really excellent food we had cooked. And the placemats were supposed to be like a conversation piece to talk about where you're from. That's such a common dinner party, kind of small talk, but we were embracing that and kind of mocking it at the same time. And so it was like building this buzz, but on a very, very small, community-driven scale. And we did also a life drawing class where we had food there, and the model was like using all these props and kitchen props, and you would kind of draw and eat, and it was just fun. So I think there was people were like, this is kind of cool and weird. Where is it going to go? I remember at the party where we drew the model, we had just actually bought the original trucks. We were showing people pictures on someone's desktop at the office, we're going to get this truck. And I think friends were like, wow, this is, and this is also Freya and I hadn't known each other that long. And by the way, we were a couple, so we hadn't been together that long. So I think both of our friends were like, her friends were like, oh, this is, of course, Freya's doing this. And my friends were like, of course, Natasha like bought this weird truck. And, like they sort of like knew this was our thing. Family, by parents being great parents that they are, introduced caution to the mix, which I don't blame them. I mean, I would do the same thing, kind of probably mentoring myself back then. You really want to make such a big change. You're on this kind of professional track. You just got a master's in architecture. You're going to have an ice cream truck. And I told them, I just somehow knew, I said, in 2 years, we're going to be laughing about this conversation because I know we've got something here and we've got to act. And really the second that it started to have such early success, which it did, which was, pretty amazing that happened, they were super supportive and proud and showing all their friends. So I would say, overall, a really good network. And the last thing I'll say too is we were lucky to have some mentors in the industry very early on. We had a cookie co-manufacturer and an ice cream co-manufacturer that we used really early on that could have closed the door on us so easily. We were bringing nothing to the table. And they sort of, I think maybe were paying it forward from someone who took a chance on them. And that made a really big difference for us, I must say.
Well, and you also were on the front end of the food truck craze. Talk about being in that moment in time in the industry.
We Googled hipster ice cream truck. Nothing really came up. Like, how often does that happen on any Google search, especially these days? So it was like, we knew we had to act. And there's, in a way, because there felt like there was less saturation, we could really be pioneering. I think that was a helpful, like, in a way, a limitation of the risk than like getting out there when there's already so much. Okay, how are you going to stand out now? So that's one thing. The other thing too is, we were both living at home. We just felt like there wasn't that much to lose. I think I would assess risk very differently now, having a family, having a house. You have more on the line. You think of things differently. And truly there is something about your 20s where you just don't think things through that can be helpful. Like, I think you're not like, okay, well, if I do this, then this and this, and you're just like, okay, I have a really good feeling about this and I'm going to go for it. And that's kind of like how you make a lot of decisions then. And like, it just changes, which is a good thing too. But I think there's something very special about that, because I think if we had thought about it a lot, there would have been a lot of reasons not to, and you could kind of back away from it. So I do think a lot had to do with that time in life,
So you've mentioned Freya a few times.
Yeah.
Tell us about meeting her and how
Yeah.
you guys decided to work together and sort of what are the challenges of working together.
So meeting her is a funny story. I had studied abroad in Italy in college, and I had a friend that I lived with there who just moved to LA and said, you have to meet my friend Freya. You guys are going to be best friends. It was not romantic auspices that, at first brought us together. And then the night I had met her, that's how long ago this is, I had babysat that night. It's like, and the babysitting ended at 12:30. And then I would like have my plans after babysitting. I can't imagine now, you can, if you need fact checking on this, you ask my babysitting clients who were like, yeah, they thought it was insane. They're like, oh, okay, going somewhere at 1 a.m, So, okay, gonna go meet Freya at this birthday party. I actually, walking into the party, split my pants. And I stood in the street. It was this true sliding door moment. Should I just go home? Is this a sign that I should just go to bed? And I thought, it's a house party. Someone will have something to change into. Again, the 25-year-old, you're like, not like, but then if they don't, then what do I do? You know what I mean? Like, you're just like, they'll be fine. So I go in and I wait for Freya for like 2.5 hours, trying to get away. I kept saying to the mutual friend, it's just not going to happen tonight. It's okay. She's like, you cannot leave until Freya gets here. She was possessed by having us meet. And then we met and we just talked briefly, gave each other business cards. And Freya then runs into another friend who knows both of us 2 days later and really talks me up. I mean, this friend sounded as though I had paid her to say all these nice things about me. It's like, thank you. She said I was like a triathlete and architect. And she said, oh, and she's a lesbian, Natasha. And I hadn't really, I had kind of been thinking about that direction, but I hadn't really, wasn't officially out, let's say. And so Freya had also been kind of thinking about, exploring that. And so thought, oh, Natasha will be my practice girlfriend. And so Monday when I emailed her, she thought I was, making a romantic gesture, even though I wasn't, it was just friendly. And then it kind of all built from there. But really from like that first initial contact, those first few emails, I sort of told her I was doing this architecture ice cream thing. And it was truly like everything at once, the relationship, the business, all coming together so quickly. And it's the kind of thing, again, at this age, you're like, oh, this is going to be a disaster. Like you could even have said that to us, but sometimes things just do work out. I mean, we really, the relationship kept growing, the business kept growing. We were really good complements to each other as founders. I had design, I had sales, I had marketing, the kind of PR side too. Freya had business development. She could do kind of the pro formas, operations, finance, and you have to cover so much ground when you're getting started. It's like we could do everything together and just move really quickly and have such a good time doing it, like driving the truck to like a wedding in Ojai. I mean, it was so cool, So it did work out. I mean, we're married today, we have a son. So, but I still, when you kind of have that, even though Freya's not day-to-day at the business anymore, she's always my partner on some level. She's a mentor to me, I'm a mentor to her. We're always talking business, and it's a really cool thing to be able to have had that shared experience.
So what does your day-to-day look like?
What I love about what I do is each day is not the same, so it never gets old. I do try to start with something healthy, like a workout, Barry's boot camp flywheel. I do this boot camp with Lacey Stone Fitness too quite often through the year, and I think really giving you that energy to get more done, be more productive. If you can make time, great. So always almost start that way. I do like to ride my bike to the office too, if possible, or walk. I'm just a couple miles away, so it's nice. And always spending time with my son in the morning. When you are a working parent, you maybe get an hour in the morning, an hour at night, and that's it when they're this age. So always really making the time. And then usually my day is a mixture of, there be interviews, media. So much is about telling the story, especially with a brand like ours, especially being women-owned in this time. It's so important our voice is out there. So I spend a lot of time with that, whether it's over the phone, interview, writing, filming with the great Passionistas like you guys. Public speaking has become a huge part, I would say, at least a few times a week. I have regular meetings with my team, so each day a different department. So that's always a part of the day. Every day includes design, whether it's a packaging fix, marketing, working with the team on something that they need visually, but there's always at least a part of my day spent designing, which I'm very grateful for. Taste testing. Today I have to try our new non-dairy bases, coconut milk base. We've done cashew milk, so there's always a taste testing element. It's weird when I travel and I don't eat, I really eat like a whole sandwich necessarily, but when I haven't tasted an ice cream or a cookie, even for 24, 48 hours, I'm like, something is missing from it. Something is weird. And I really crave it, so that's always part of it. That's the usual mixture. I'm really involved in R&D and product development. And then I try to make some point of the day be a social element, but and with what I do, because it is so fun, it always does end up being, there's some work component usually. So I'll have a drink with another entrepreneur after, or lunch, or, there's some kind of element of it's social, but there's also, maybe we're talking about a cool partnership idea, but pretty much every day has that as well. So yeah, that's, I would say, the typical breakdown.
Is there a moment in your day that's kind of your most important, even though it's so different, is there a moment that's kind of your most important daily routine?
The workout definitely is, and it's so important because it's not something at the office. So I do really treasure that. And it's time to really kind of have an idea, in your own mind. I always get ideas when I'm working out, mostly Coolhaus ideas, sometimes just random ideas, And then I would say, I really actually, what I love being here in the office, in the headquarters. I love my team. I love the culture here. There's something that I really like about the moment that I get in and I just set everything up. It's very routine. Where I hang each bag, even in there, I have my matcha green tea with almond milk type, drink with me, and water, and then turning on my music, in the creating the start, I think is feels very ceremonial. And I really like that. And it's you kind of take that deep breath, okay, what am I going to get out of today? What can I give to today? Yeah.
And how do you pass that vibe on to your employees and your team? How do you make this atmosphere a fun place to be?
I think so much is just about being yourself, and knowing that you can like really work hard and have a good time doing it. So like embracing the silliness and knowing that the silliness actually could be some of the best ideas and kind of creates a comfort level with being an individual that then breeds more cool ideas. Always hearing the ideas of your team, never saying, no, this is not for you, like someone has a good idea, share it. We're a small team, So I think that is really important to do because it's like, I think I wasn't like a class clown by any means, but I would say like a lot of times I can remember like, on the soccer team, wherever like, oh, stop, you two are laughing over there, quiet, and it didn't like bother me so much, but I think I always was like, I know that if I'm going to go and play soccer for 2 hours, I'm going to want to be able to laugh with my friend for a minute, while we're in the huddle. And I think that kind of stayed with me, like that's okay. And I think when you can show how fun it can be, then you really can get so much more out of your team because they're wanting to do it. They're not being like forced to sit behind the desk. So I think that's really important. And then like always things like when we're trying a new flavor, just like let everyone in to try it. Someone's not being hired necessarily in a certain position to say, oh, we're relying on your palate to like fix this, but like let them try it, like let it be a team thing, a bonding thing to all sit and like see what everyone thinks about the seasonal line or whatever it may be. So that's also something I try to like kind of really open up.
What do you think is the most rewarding part of your job?
I think the responses to the product and to the brand, when people really get it and they have that experience that you're really wanting them to have, I mean, so much goes into it, and that's really special. And this is the kind of brand that like I not to like toot the horn about this, but like I do get emails where it's like, this is the best ice cream sandwich I've ever had. This is the best ice cream. Like there is a good chance with the level that we're producing at, with the innovation, with the quality of the ingredients, with the branding, that people could say this is the best. Like that is what we're always aiming for. But how special to like have that, place with someone. I always try to think like, oh, if I didn't create Coolhaus, what would I think and how would I feel about it? And knowing that like I'm making this with my own standards, and I like, what if I was just someone who tried it one day and took a bite of like the Mies vanilla roll and was like, oh my God, that's the best like ice cream dessert I've had. How special is that? That's something you remember your whole life. So like, I mean, that's like incredible. So I'm really, really, glad to be able to be behind that. And I also do think like, with your team, it's so like they're spending all their days. You had this crazy idea to start and they're spending their whole days and they're putting themselves on the line to make that happen. And you're giving them a livelihood in exchange. And like, what a cool thing that is. It's easy to like forget that because you're so in the day to day, but like, it's such an honor, I think, to have people who are their whole day is spent for this. So, that's another thing I think that really stands out to me.
What do you think is the biggest challenge you've faced in the career, and how have you overcome it?
Finance, money, it's never going to be perfect and easy. There's not enough, or when you get it, how do you spend it perfectly? Are you getting the return, doing the analysis, being on top of it? It's really, it's just, that's the nature of, that's business, and you got to get used to it, but it's challenging. And then I also think really getting the right people, on the team and knowing how to motivate and inspire, and everyone's so different in what makes them click and tick. So I think that takes time to learn. When we were really young and started, we just didn't know. It just takes time for you to know who you're going to be as a leader and a manager. What works for you too? What's your kind of like? For me, I'm like, I don't think you have to be a jerk, to get people to do great things. You could actually be really nice, and they'll do great things. But it takes a minute to figure out your style. Some people like, maybe they do just that is their style. They have to be like really, just hard, and that's the only thing that's going to work. And that took them a while to figure out, and that's what the answer is. But you're not like born knowing that, I think. So that's a challenge.
You're so creative, and we can only imagine that every once in a while the ideas just don't come as easily as they usually do. So how do you get through a creative block?
I think that you shouldn't be the only one on your team having ideas, and so listening to the ideas of your team, whether they're coming from marketing. I do have a great like R&D consultant and a production manager. They have ideas. Sales has ideas. You never know where the ideas are going to come from. It could be someone in the scoop shop who's like, oh, I thought of this really cool thing. So just being open, and I think even if you're not producing the ideas, you still are always going to know a good one when you hear it. And then also having a creative block could mean like, well, you really need to get out of the office and just like read or something, because it's not all going to come from staring at your inbox. Like if you're not getting inspiration from the outside, that could also be the reason. So identifying the source of like why maybe you're drawing up creatively a little bit and breaking that.
You're listening to the Passionistas Project podcast with our guest, Natasha Case, co-founder and CEO of Coolhaus Ice Cream. You can find Coolhaus products at over 6,000 grocery stores nationwide or visit one of their brick-and-mortar locations if you're in LA or Dallas. And find out where the LA, New York, and Dallas trucks will be next by checking out their calendar on the Coolhaus website. Now here's more of our interview with Natasha. What would you say is your secret to a rewarding life?
Secret to a rewarding life, I think just finding a way to spend majority of your time doing what you're passionate about. I mean, you guys are the Passionistas, If you are spending a big chunk of your day feeling like you're contributing, that you're doing something that you love, that you light up other people around you, that they light you up, you are going to feel fulfilled. And that's going to just be a chain reaction for so many things in life. And I think also, I forget that I was reading some quotation. It's like happiness is, you can never be about what you don't have. You have to be happy with what you have. That's really the secret, because there's always wanting more. You could have one house and be already thinking about the next and the next. It's like, but what the house that you have is great because you love spending time there, or whatever it may be. And I think that really is key, and knowing that you could have that bare minimum, Freya, Remy, family, friends, the people around you that really matter, and those relationships, and not the material things. And you are going to, focusing on that, you're going to feel that there's that satisfaction level, and that no matter what, those people are there for you. So for me, that's really it.
Do you have a rule that you live by?
I like this one that came from a mentor, Bobby Margolis, who was our angel investor. You can walk through a wall when you don't know it's there. And I really think that that's key. I kind of spoke to it in the founding story, but you take risks that you don't even realize you're taking, and that's so essential in business. When you know too much, it can actually hold you back. And so it's so important to embrace a little bit of that naivete and just go for it. Take calculated risks, but just take those risks and say, look, it's okay. And that's how the biggest great breakthroughs happen. So that's definitely a big key for me.
Is there something you wish you knew then, though, that you know now?
Early on, there was so much. We were definitely being ourselves and being quirky and wacky. But what's interesting is as we've gotten farther, I feel like there's even more comfort level with the innovation, with the uniqueness. Maybe there were some, for example, flavor choices playing it safer because we're oh, more people will want this. And I think you realize as you keep going, no, but people really want. And it's also a shift in the culture that people are more open-minded, but people want you to really be you and be different, and they can really identify with that and feel that they're expressing themselves through that artistry of the brand and the uniqueness. So I think, I would have maybe even pushed that further, especially with some of the packaged items. And we're doing it anyway. Now, the flavors we have coming out for pints, milkshake and fries, buttered French toast, midnight munchies, they're really unique, street cart churro dough. But we are also doing a chocolate and vanilla that are fantastic. And then 3 new sandwiches, double s'mores, birthday cake, and that dough though, which is an amazing cookie dough sandwich. So I think just really just owning it, And then also it's interesting, we're starting to get the message out more about being woman owned. But why was this not a bigger part? It was part of the story always, but we didn't have the seal on the packaging when we first launched the way we do now. So it's really, really making sure people hear that. Walking into our headquarters, we have women owned on our mural, literally owning it, So I'm glad that we're doing all these things now and really getting behind our messaging. The absolute best sourcing that we can do, every ingredient, equal partner chocolate, hormone-free dairy, California-based produce like the figs in our balsamic fig, using like great fresh mint in our dirty mint chip pie and sandwich. Like the ingredient sourcing, I spent a lot of time with that, just making sure everything is non-GMO. Those elements are really, really important to us and the consumer. Again, we're our target. So I think I've just, seen how important it is to kind of also stand by. And as you get bigger, it's actually in a way easier, I think, to always polish your sourcing because you have better buying power. People assume it's the opposite. Oh, you're just going to like drop all your morals as you grow because you're just a big mass brand. First of all, we're not a big mass brand at this point, but we have grown tremendously. And I feel that we can even make stronger commitments as we grow because we make it a priority.
Looking back now on everything you've accomplished, is there a moment that you think something either small or big that you would have done differently? And is there something you look at and go, oh, wow, I really nailed it?
There's definitely like plenty of mistakes along the way, but in a way you can't go back and think of changing them because you really needed those as like growth, opportunities and learning experiences. I think as long as you're like fail fast, which I think mostly we've done, like you can't drag it out. If it's not working, you got to cut the cord. So I think I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm proud of that because there are still little messes that were made, but I'm glad we were able to just keep evolving. I definitely am really glad for, the wholesale is so big for us, the wholesale expansion. There's such an opportunity there to really become the household brand of our generation. And we're really one of the only women-owned brands on the shelf, truly on a national scale. Like we're looking at like, there's really nobody else of that, premium women-owned. It's just crazy. In a way, it infuriates me. In a way, it's something to be very proud of. But had we not just showed up at that Whole Foods one day and asked them to try us on the shelf, it's like it all could have been very different. Like I'm so glad that we just went for that, even if we weren't ready, even if it wasn't perfect, even if it, we just got it out there, and then now we've like evolved it so far, and we have a whole kind of team and strategy around it. But I think that was like a really big win, is taking that chance on the shelf, after a couple of years of having the food truck and even thinking of building the brick and mortar, which have all been huge, and the wholesale wouldn't be where it is without those things. But the wholesale was a really particularly good gamble because it has grown so exponentially.
What do you think is the biggest challenge facing women maybe in the whole food industry?
There still is a huge problem with investing in women-owned brands. And a lot of it has to do with not enough women being on the other side of the table either. There's just a shortage in both directions. And it's so weird because the majority of the consumption and the buying comes from us. I think when you're the creator, you want to be able to like be your own customer and really get in that headspace. And I think that's why Coolhaus has been such like a pure organic, thing, is like we are our target. And so you're like, oh yeah, I would want that. Of course, like it's easy. Why is there that big disconnect on, and kind of overall in the industry? So I do think that that's an issue. And I do think whether it's conscious or subconscious, there is just not enough dollars. Women aren't asking for enough. They're not getting enough. There's just an overall kind of smallness that we need to break out of and get on that different game level. And I think it is moving, and the dial is moving, and there's so much about the conversation happening around it. And there's a huge shift in the way we talk to one another and support one another. And it's all there. So we just need to keep pushing, make sure that happens. But that to me is the biggest challenge.
What were your parents like when you were a kid? And what would your mom teach you about what a girl could do?
Yeah, I'm so lucky. Both my parents, I think they always encouraged anything that I showed interest in. I always showed interest creatively. My mom, if you look at their careers, my mom is an animation director at Disney. My dad's an architect, self-employed, so also owning his own business. So kind of a very ideal, two people to look up to very much. People who were creative and had that artist side, but also, could foray that into consistent professional careers to support a family. I think kind of merge those things well, like the art side, but then something that's very, that has that practical element too, very applicable. And I always looked at their careers and thought, it's so cool what they do, but I definitely want to do something different. Ironically, my first real job after grad school at Disney Imagineering, architect at Disney, could not have been more than. I was still living at home too, carpooling with my mom to Disney. It was like very in the nest, good Jewish daughter, what can you say? But I would say my mom really has a very kind of strong female kind of, I always thought of my parents as equals, if not my mom being like, when she really wanted something for the house or to go somewhere, I mean, she really, has that kind of presence. So I never thought, oh, I should have anything less because I'm a woman. It never even crossed my mind. I always, I think, inherently thought of myself as an equal. And in a way, I didn't even think like, oh, I'm a girl and I'm equal to the boys. It was just like, we're all equal. It was so, I think having that so early was, in that formative stage really did help me and helps me lead today. Also, I played a lot of sports, and I think same thing, like, even though it's not that long ago, I mean, I'm 34 years old, but there's still much less, like, we kind of played co-ed sports with a lot of the things I played, basketball, for example. And I think it was kind of a good thing just playing with the boys, because again, I just thought like, oh, I can play with these guys, and I would. And I almost always scored the first basket of every game because no boy wanted to guard me, but the boys on my team knew I was good, so they would throw me the first pass and I would score, So I think things like that, they're really encouraging. And yeah, as I said, like, it's not, I'm sure there's moments where, oh, they thought I was going to do something, I want to do something else. But mostly I think I was like pretty on like a track. And then Coolhaus was a very big shift. But I think when you have like such a strong support system, it's easier to take risks sometimes. And I was 25. So it's like, that's when you really start to say, okay, what's it going to be? Like, what am I going to do with all this? So, I think, yeah, it's a good, lucky kind of start. And also they're here in LA. So that makes it kind of ideal. I really feel like I know the city. I have a community here, other family who lives here too. When you start a business in the city you're from, it does really make a difference.
Have you had other female role models in your life besides your mom?
Definitely my grandma, my maternal grandmother. She was such a strong, independent character, and really kind of just such a confidence. And it's so interesting because, she, I think she would have been more, she lived into her late 90s. And so almost a century, has passed, where you also think like, what would they have been like in this time? Because already in their time, when things were much more, I think limited for women, and they still found all these breakthroughs. I really admire that, because you really see the pioneering element of it. And then also weirdly, because it was a century ago, like, she grew up in like upstate New York, and then sometimes she would just like disappear and go to the cities, and like no one knew where she was. But like, what a special thing. Like, it would be so hard not to be tracked now with cell phones. And so in a way too, they are very much a product of their time. And she took advantage of that to like go and explore, and then she would come back, whatever. Like, I just found that such a fascinating thing. Like, you could just go somewhere and not be, so easily tracked. You weren't even necessarily getting into trouble. You were just, so definitely her. I think a lot of my teachers growing up, I really admired. I like really loved my like early education was very immersive, and like when we were studying the Native Americans, we like took all the furniture out of the classroom and like got into 4 tribes. And I remember I was in the Iroquois tribe and I was the shaman. And I think that actually influenced like how I run the business, kind of like you're a spiritual leader when you're the CEO. And that was like, but I think I learned early on that like your education is not homework. It's like you live it, and you live and breathe it, and that's what makes you actually learn. And that's kind of my approach with Coolhaus, is like, if you're kind of doing it all the time, but you don't even notice that you're doing it. And like teachers through elementary and middle school were just really, so supportive and so about that, immersive education. And definitely, I think I looked up to them for kind of guiding us in that way. And I just think, education is such an important one for me, as like something I want to be able to give back to as I grow in my career. And we have done a lot already with that, but to continue. And it's just crazy in this country how it's not enough of a priority. But I'm grateful for, what I was able to get.
And were there women that you saw on TV or in pop culture,
yeah,
that had an influence on you?
Well, definitely, I mentioned growing up as an athlete. Like, I think I admire that, like, kind of the early, when in like basketball, when you first had that early kind of crop of female athletes, like in the Olympics. Like, I forget what even year that was, in the 90s, when they were like really kind of breaking out. That early generation. And then also with soccer, like Mia Hamm, and, if you watch a documentary on like the kind of that Olympian soccer team that we came to know in the 90s, there was really even there was no money behind them. There was no kind of like even concept of women playing professionally on that level and becoming icons in pop the way Mia Hamm was like, I think, it was like some like shampoo commercial that she did. And you were like, oh my God, like a female American soccer, athlete on that level of pop icon. And, they would all sleep like in the hotel rooms, like on the floor. And, there was nothing behind them. And then they still kind of broke out and were that first generation to say, this is an opportunity for young girls like I was at that age. I didn't become a professional soccer player, but knowing that there was something beyond just obviously playing it for fun as a kid was, I think, really, really important and inspiring. And I always saw that as like, that's like, women saying, no, we're like a force to be reckoned with in this too. And I think that was really important for me. And then, I don't know, Carmen Sandiego. She was really cool.
Where is she?
Where is she?
World is she?
Yeah. But I would say that I really was like in tune with the athletes growing up. I think the 90s for women was like a big breakthrough decade. I think for sports and pop culture. Yeah.
Two of the things that you guys have done probably better than anybody else we've seen is your branding and your social media. So talk a bit about those strategies and maybe how they've evolved over time.
The branding is very much about the storytelling and expressing the point of view on product and your priorities. And so that's, as I think, being really hands-on as the CEO. That's the type of CEO that I am, is very creative side, and having that touch that just like you have as a founder is so key, and really keeping tabs on that. So I would say that's been a really important, element is the storytelling, and having it be known however you can in simple visuals, but also having the story on the packaging, and telling people who you are. People expect to know who you are. They want to know who you, where you eat, what you look like, where you're from. It's such a personal time for brands. And we're a good brand for that because we have a lot to say and we're very open to sharing who we are. So I would say that's a really big part of it. And then also just like being weird, not being like, this looks like a product designer created this, like, because that's how it's supposed to look. It's like, let's just make something that we think is what we want it to look like, and then work our way backwards to making sure that it fits all the standards on the shelf. But kind of like, it looks so different, I think. Like all of our packaging is always almost kind of look like weird astronaut ice cream type, but that's good. Like you have to be weird on the shelf. You cannot look like everybody else. You cannot be responsive to the design trends. And then that branding has to infiltrate every element, your workspace, the packaging in the shops, online, the coupons, the brochure, everything has to have that. So I think that's really, really key. It has to be ubiquitous. And then as far as the social media also is a big part of the storytelling. I mean, that's such a like great kind of channel to just tell the consumer constantly who you are, what you're about. And I think you really have to hit them over the head with it because people have to read things a lot of times before it really absorbs. It's such a distraction world, that we live in. So you have to be clear with the message, and then again, and eventually you'll get that pickup. And I think, just making things like visually inspiring, you are going to catch people's eye with the photo, and then they're going to read. That's just the way it is right now. So we obviously make that a priority to make really beautiful images, really fun images, and draw people in through that seduction, and then really kind of break open that story element of what we do.
What advice would you give to a young girl who wants to become an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. This is a great path for women. Women make great leaders. We have such a fantastic way of building community and thinking. And again, in consumer, for example, we are so much the ones who are making those decisions as consumers. We should be on the other side of it. I think research it, and there's so much to learn now. Even if it's a show like Shark Tank or whatever it may be, just get into it. Like read all these blogs. There's so much information. There's so much more that is out there now than when I was growing up. I didn't even really see it as an option. I didn't really know the word until much later. To me, I came to this more by process of elimination, I would say. And young girls have such a different opportunity to just embrace it and actually follow that path all the way through and be much more set up for it. And then I would also say, think really big. Too many women were like, okay, we're going to think of something that we know we can accomplish and get it done. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we need more of like the big thinking as women. And so I hope this next generation of girls really does come to like just own that.
So where do you see yourself and the company in 5 years?
In 5 years, I definitely want to be on that level of, household brand. That we're already a national brand. We're sold in every state. We have some international business in Asia and the Middle East. But I want to be like Coolhaus is that go-to grab, whether it's the pint or the sandwich or other novelties we create that's in that freezer, especially for the millennial generation and ongoing. I would love to really, we were close to 10 million in sales this year. In 5 years, no reason we shouldn't be a $100 million brand. I mean, we're on the track of more and more growth, and the big gets bigger. And I want to stay the best as we grow. And personally, I'd love to set myself and my family up to be able to enjoy the fruits of our labor. And depending on where things are at that point, there may be an opportunity for me to become an investor and invest in other women-owned brands. I would love to sit on the other side of that table in the future and be a mentor and help invest in the things that I see as promising and help them grow. So that's definitely a personal goal.
We always like to ask people sort of a fun question. Because we're the pop culture passionistas, if you could pick one pop culture icon from any period of time and walk in their shoes for one day, who would you pick and why?
The first person, honestly, that popped into my head was Eleanor Roosevelt, because I did this paper on her in 8th grade that it was about FDR and Eleanor Roosevelt, but it was so interesting. Like, I really felt like I knew her by the end of it because I just got so into the research, and I'm fascinated by that period of history anyway. And to know, kind of what was in her mind, I think, on that personal level, I'd be so curious about. Similarly, I think, who I would really pick, I would say, is Katharine Graham, because I read a great New Yorker profile on her, maybe it was like a year or two ago, and she just had such an interesting, she was so self-aware, and she's sort of, coming to it as like major socialite, and not a socialite, but someone with a lot of social power and from a wealthy background, although crazy family history also. But it's not like, oh, okay, great, and now I'm like sitting at the top and it's all good. I mean, it was still such a struggle for her. And I think she felt so many limitations, in a way felt limitations as a woman, like things that had become ingrained in her, but she was aware of them and then trying to push out. It wasn't like this block on her, but she knew, okay, this was for some reason something ingrained in me that I have to be this kind of way. Like, I think she wanted to like speak really concisely the way that men did in meeting. And she would like fight to do that. Even something simple like that, just knowing like I need to be able to just say something and drop the mic the way they do. And little social cues like that. But she was like very set and kind of in a way at a later age on changing that and kind of creating this persona that could really lead. And then, man, what like an interesting moment to lead what she did, like with the Post. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I think she's like an incredibly fascinating woman that span these multi-generations, and really represented the change for that time and a leader of that change, not only just for women, but overall for journalism and for politics and so many elements that she touched. She's just, I think, to even spend one day in her mind would have been a fascinating place.
Thanks for listening to the Passionistas Project podcast and our interview with Natasha Case, co-founder and CEO of Coolhaus Ice Cream, which is available in over 6,000 grocery stores nationwide. They also have 3 locations in Culver City, California, Pasadena, California, and Dallas, Texas. If you're in LA, Dallas, or New York City, you can track down one of their food trucks or just visit their website at Coolhaus for next-day delivery. Be sure to follow Coolhaus on all their social media pages and subscribe to our Passionistas Project podcast so you don't miss any of our upcoming inspiring guests.